This is the Sega Reactor, a truly cursed console by AtGames. Not only is it technically a Mega Drive, albeit a terrible one, but it's also a Wii-style plug and play. Join me in today's video as I tell you more about it. The Sega Reactor was initially shown off to the press as early as February 2010, under the working title of Sega Zone, or Zone Sega as the box referred to it. These images are certainly interesting, as both the controllers and the console don't make any mention of the Sega Zone branding, and instead are off-the-shelf Zone 40 shells. Zone 40 was a plug-and-play console manufactured by Subar, with its games being produced by Wakesing. Don't worry, I'll speak more of the Zone 40 later, when we get onto the Reactor's interactive sports games. But first, let's take a look at the Sega Reactor itself, which ended up releasing in the summer of 2010. If you know your Wii-inspired plug-and-plays, you will know that this final shell of the Sega Reactor had been taken from the Zone 60, as opposed to the Zone 40 shell on the prototype. The Zone 62 was likely manufactured by Subar, as the Subar Smart Station had also used the same shell. So yes, so far this Sega Reactor has absolutely nothing to do with Sega or AtGames. Something that you cannot tell on camera is the fact that this console weighs absolutely nothing, which makes sense, since there's practically nothing inside. There's a single tiny circuit board that is in charge of the whole system. Technically it's two circuit boards that solder together, because you see, what makes the Reactor truly cursed is the fact that it has two systems on chips. One SoC is the Sunplus SPG240 that handles the bootleg Wii portion of the console, while the other SoC is a Genesis on a chip. It's likely the DMC Titan, but as both chips are under a blob top, it's hard to know for certain. Let me just end off this portion by pointing out that you can run this console via wall power or via 4 AA batteries. The controllers too are taken from the Zone 60. They're infrared based, like a TV remote, which means that you need line of sight of the console in order to not miss inputs. This was the cheapest possible way to implement wireless, especially back in 2010. When we boot up the console, we have three options: Mega Drive games, arcade games, and interactive sports games. Let's talk Mega Drive first. We have 20 games from Sega. While there are a handful of games that I do like on this list, I have to say it's not a terrific list, and the Sonic situation is just dreadful. Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine is a fine game, but it's not exactly the best of what Mega Drive had to offer. Sonic Spinball is certainly a game to play when you are bored out of your mind, and including Sonic and Knuckles feels like a bit of a kick in the teeth. Maybe there are some fans of SAC out there, and if so then I'm sorry, but it is not my go-to Sonic title. Frankly, it doesn't matter anyway, since the Reactor sucks as a Mega Drive. Save states and cartridge backups aren't supported. Actually, that does explain the game list now that I think about it. So any longer games are pointless to play on the system, unless you sit down and finish the game in one sitting, or leave the console powered on overnight, or have a pen and paper ready for any games that supported password systems. The bigger issue, however, is the sound emulation, which is played back at the wrong pitch. Initially I thought that's because of the quirks with emulating the Yamaha chipset on the Mega Drive, which isn't a small feat, but after bringing its stopwatch out, the games are in fact running slow. While I would say that Mean Bean Machine runs at the correct speed, albeit with a 20% lower pitch, Sonic and Knuckles is perfectly 20% slower in pitch and tempo, so the truth lies likely somewhere in the middle as to whether it's bad sound recreation or bad game speed. Next up are the bonus games, which mostly consist of Mega Drive games by the Brazilian game developers called DevWorks Game Technology, who seem to have been commissioned by Tectoy in the early to mid 2000s to develop games for Tectoy's Mega Drive plug-and-play systems in Brazil. How AtGames ended up with these games is anyone's guess, but I imagine Tectoy licensed these games for mere pennies. I even have a physical cartridge from AtGames that features these games, which would have been bundled in with other AtGames Mega Drive plug-and-plays that featured a cartridge slot. These games are straight up awful. You can tell that DevWorks' bread and butter were flash games, because these feel like low-tier flash games from the 2000s. Imagine receiving this console, going to the arcade section expecting Space Harry or Mortal Kombat, actual 16-bit arcade games, and receiving air hockey. Or Bottle Taps Race, which has you pick your angle of direction and speed, and then painfully watch your bottle cap slide on the track, and then your opponents, over and over again. These DevWorks games have a very My First Mega Drive game sort of feel to them. In this game, no smooth scrolling has been implemented, and in fact, anytime the screen switches, the music glitches out. The music also seemingly doesn't take advantage of the Mega Drive's vast sound chip capabilities at all. All of their games sound more or less the same, which makes me wonder if they have created or used a very basic sound driver. Actually, Gems does have presets for these sorts of fatty bloopy sounds, so maybe that's what it was. Anyway, let me tell you about a few games here that I do like. Bomber was developed by Tectoy in 2005. It's a pretty fun clone of Bomberman's Battle Mode. You get pickups that increase your blast zone, let you drop multiple bombs, and more. The opponents have 3 lives each, and you have to blow up all of your opponents to win. The game is made easier by the opponents randomly losing their intelligence and either stopping dead in their tracks when they see a bomb, or walking towards it in the last second. Still, the game provides mere minutes of fun. There's also Spider by DevWorks, which is a simple game that consists of you shooting down spiders before they get onto your cake. The longer you play, the more spiders appear. I admittedly like these sorts of games. I was a big Crazy Lunch guy when I was a kid, so it's no surprise that I do like this one. Alright, let's finally move on to the last section, the interactive sports games. Selecting this option causes the system to reboot, as from here on out, the Sun Plus chip is in charge of the console. Since I previously mentioned I'll be talking more about the Zone 40, yeah, all of these games are taken directly from that console. These games claim to be interactive because of the control's ability to send shaking, which translates that to the press of an A button. There is no real motion sensing here like on the Wii. Tennis, shake to hit the ball. Table tennis, shake to hit the ball. Golf? Well, this is interesting. The game is a clone of Neo Turf Masters over on the Neo Geo, using the same assets, with slight recoloring here and there, and with none of the 2.5D graphics. Fishing? About as exciting as real fishing. Wait, hold on, I think I got something. Need to keep shaking. Wow. Alright. Football has you shake the controller to pick the angle and intensity of the shot. Though when you are the goalie, you can move around, and then shake to jump. Swimming? Shake controller to increase the speed. Bowling? Oh hey, I know that face. It's funny how out of place Dr. Breen looks here compared to the other characters. He's even got the blue tint on him from the screens in his office. My favourite part is the fact that when you do bad, Dr. Breen becomes sad. Aww. I think you get the point that I'm making though. None of these games are interesting or exciting in any way, when they mostly consist of mildly shaking your controller. Though I do like Sword of Warrior, which is the most game-like game on here. You're a He-Man looking character who kills skeletons, fairies, knights and other assets Wakesing were able to steal. You don't really have to aim, thank god, since the D-pad on this controller feels like a dry sponge, just be in close enough vicinity to the enemy in order to shake to kill. You also have shurikens that help you to kill enemies a bit further away from you. Each stage has unlockable refills for the shurikens, as well as health refills. You can beat the game in about 10 minutes, but that's still 10 more minutes of gameplay than any other interactive sports game on here. Wait, how is this a sports game again? Overall, that's all I have to say about the Sega Reactor. Despite the fact that I've owned this console for 13 or 14 years now, I haven't thrown it away because it's so fascinating. It's the only plug-and-play Wii knockoff that can play Mega Drive games. And the way it does so is via two CPUs talking to each other to switch video outputs and hand off controller inputs. All because it was cheaper and quicker than writing a Mega Drive emulator for the Sun Plus, or using an ARM CPU like AtGames had done starting in 2017. These must have sold quite well, seeing as you can still pick them up off eBay for hardly any money. And it did make 11-year-old me happy, because I was an avid watcher of Tweederman, and this seemed like something he would have reviewed if it was released over in America.